Hello, folks, part two. This is a discussion that Dr. Tack and I will have. I'm Owen McCafferty, and this is Dr. David A. Tack, and we are talking about professional fusion practice candidates, part two. And in part two, or as the French would say, deux, we are attempting to go through some elements experientially, and not necessarily with massive canned planning, to give you an off-the-cuff, honest assessment of who Dave and I would believe would be a good candidate for a professional fusion practice. So, just to continue on the discussion, there is a part one. Please look at it. In part two, we wish to continue in our discussion about who the ideal candidate would be. Multi-practices are always a good idea. Honesty is essential. Having the ability to think differently and be open to alternative viewpoints and perspectives really is important. But Dave, what are some of the things that you saw in candidates that really struck you as being a great person? I'm thinking about a gentleman, and he'll probably be seeing this video, and I don't have permission to use his name, but he was a great surgeon. He was in the Utah area.
Right. You're talking about the great candidates, and this individual, he had multiple practices. He was probably the quintessential veterinarian, and he really didn't need to get involved with the group. I didn't think he did, but I didn't think he did until I realized the economies of scale and how it was impressive as to, he already had a great practice group and he grew it. He grew it so much, and it was as a result of our meetings, talking to others in our group, and others did this also. So part of it is they've got to want to grow, they've got to want to improve their practices, and again, at the time he came in, I thought, well, this is like the perfect practice. But he took that perfect practice and made it even better and better and better. And really that's what ended up happening for a lot of the practices, is once you get together with like and kind people that are thinking alike and are wanting to get along, the growth potential is so great. And we did this during a time, we set this up at the worst time ever. I think it was 2008, and it was crazy. There's no way you would want to set up a business like this, let alone take your practice and not give it away, but become part of an unknown entity. And it, again, I've said this a number of times, the best thing I ever did. We started at the worst time, and it grew, it flourished. It was such it was invigorating being around other people, being able to talk to them, seeing what the problems were, in other parts of the country. You think that I'm here in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas had the worst housing market. They lost more money. It was a disaster here, and yet our practice grew, and part of it was as a result of the others. They were very supportive of me and some of those practices in areas that were devastated by that. So I think the biggest thing is the camaraderie.
And the candidate. Let's talk about some of the attributes of the candidate, because this was a guy who was one of the most honorable, honest, hardworking, humble people that I've ever met my entire life. In fact, I've always said when I grow up, I want to be just like him.
Well, and it really, when I think of a lot of the people that were in our group, it really came down to honesty, integrity, respect from one another, and communicating. The communication part of it becomes so important as you grow from 27 practices to 54 to 74. That's difficult to keep that all together and keep everybody talking. And it was really, for the most part, a very, very pleasant experience. And I guess I realized my limitations when I talked to some of these people, because they were so inspiring to me as a veterinarian. And it wasn't a competition. It was like, well, gosh, I should be able to do this. So it was stimulating to have this kind of an environment, especially during the time that we started, because it was a terrible time.
Well, the best of times are the most challenging, and Dave's absolutely right. When one of the groups that we formed, it was in the nadir of the business cycle, because if you remember, on or about December 8th, 2008, I've identified that as an event. It seems like everything just collapsed, and it got worse and worse and worse in 2009, and really didn't recover till 2015. But during this time, the most challenging time, we had some of the best people who had the traits that I just identified. They were really other-centered people. They weren't self-centered. And as a result of that, everybody really did well. The biggest concern was, as the practices grew so much, getting the appropriate staff. So having those traits, being nice people, coming in, working together as a group, getting excited, wanting to be part, not only as a carpetbagger, but be somebody who's going to stay in the group and contribute. I think that was a big part of it.
You know, and now that I'm thinking about it, we all met in New Jersey in the airport hotel there. I can't remember which one. And for 2 days, we hammered this out. And initially it was, we were, talking about putting this together, but we had a 2-year period, or was it a year and a half? 2 years where anybody could get out of this. And so we just wanted to kind of feel it out, see how it was going to go. Again, we're doing it during an economic time that was the worst economic time. We had 17 individuals with 27 practices, and after 2 years, not one person got out, not one. And once that 2-year time period was up, really my practice was no longer my practice. I was a percentage owner of this whole thing, and it worked out so well, and everybody stayed in. And then from that point, we grew it. It was a great experience, and a part of that was the people that we got into this practice group.
And that's a good point, because with the partnership, we have more flexibility than we did in our predecessor entity. And because the predecessor entity was a subchapter S corporation, and there's a lot of complications under that. But with the partnership format, it was just a little bit more open. And Dave is absolutely right. We had a lot of people. This wasn't designed, the predecessor entity, for ever being sold to an outside group, ever.
And so, but that was a problem.
Yeah.
That became a problem because as time went on, there were some people that were ready to move on in their lives, sell their practices, and others wanted to stay on. Well, you either had to sell it or you had to hold on to it. And I believe with Fusion, that is a problem that's taken care of.
It is. It's completely taken, because Fusion can buy your practice, and it'll be higher than intrinsic worth. But it certainly won't be the investment/strategic value that will happen in the event of an occurrence. And you just can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be in a group like Professional Fusion for a period of years and get out and expect to get the same money as if you were going through an event. So that is good.
No, and just thinking about all the different problems that and I think we mentioned this before, income tax issues that we came up with as a result of the entity we were in and how it was set up. And with Fusion, those problems have just completely been taken care of. But I think we've mentioned that.
And there will be
earlier.
other challenges that come up. But getting back to what would really be good in a practice group, there are other elements. One of which is a practice that is appropriately staffed, a practice that has a lot of problems in staffing. We should really work out those problems in staffing before they would ever consider coming into a professional fusion group.
Right.
Because the key people are going to have other interests once they get in. This is a lot of fun, I would have to say. You get to be with people, but you got to be in a group that's big enough that can afford your absence for a little bit of time to come to some of the meetings that we talked about in a prior video.
No, it's and that's important that those people that come into this want to be involved in it.
Yes.
It again is, some people go, okay, I'm a part of this. They will go ahead and take care of it for me, and then I'm going to go off and do whatever I want to do. That's not the kind of person we want. We want a person that's going to be engaged or has the ability to get their people engaged in their practice, so they're engaged in the fusion process.
And then from the standpoint of what would occur is that the staff that you would have would get better. There's no question about it. But if you're walking into a fusion practice group, you got to have some of your staffing issues resolved. Not that they'll ever be solved, because people are going to do things, they're going to leave you, there's going to be challenges, you're going to grow, and ironically with that growth comes new opportunities.
So really, you don't want a practice coming in that has a bunch of problems that they think Fusion is going to take care of.
Right.
That's not going to work. It isn't going to work that way.
Fusion will be a great resource, but don't expect it to be the panacea, because if your pathologies are so severe, I think you ought to see the appropriate people to cure the ill before you come in. So we don't want to mislead anybody. We're looking for the best. And there's a lot of really great practices in veterinary medicine, dentistry, and dermatology. In fact, my own dermatologist just told me 3 days ago, that about what goes on with the specific practice group that they're in. And it's interesting. The similarities are so much the same. But the main issue is that you get a group that has things developed, and you'd be amazed at how much better it becomes. But if you're in the level of pathology that you'll be on life support soon, don't come into a professional fusion practice. And quite frankly, we won't let you, because I'll counsel you to do things and maybe get them resolved before you come through.
Right. Yeah, Fusion is not here to correct the ills of a practice that comes in. We expect the practice to come in, operating on all 8 cylinders. And really what Fusion does for you is we should, or as a group, make our practices better. We should increase the bottom line with the economies of scale that we can have. But the day-to-day trying to fix HR problems and practices, I don't see that as Fusion's goal.
No, it's not, because our reclamation efforts are best served for those specialists that come in and try to strip the practice for parts, and that's not what we want. So anyways, with that in mind, we hope between the first and the second part you see if you're the kind of candidate that enjoys it. One last thing, Dave, because there was something that you mentioned before when we were first talking, and that is that you have to make sure that the practice equity owner's family is in accord too. Because you don't want to have a spouse who is saying, well, I don't think you should be in this. And what would happen if?
Well, and so my wife is a great example. She couldn't wrap her mind around, maybe we talked about this before, she couldn't wrap her mind around giving up 100% of something that we owned, was growing, was doing well. But, as a veterinarian, it was doing well, but I didn't realize how well it could do. And what convinced her was, I said, what happens if I pass away? You're not a veterinarian. How are you going to manage this place? Are you going to get another veterinarian in here? And she doesn't have the desire, didn't have the desire or the skill set to do it. She'd probably try it, but I don't think she would have been able to do it. And she would have had to have sold it to someone for not near what it's worth, a multiple much less than what you get even as a one-off. So I told her, how are we going to do this? If I pass away, then you're going to get the rent from the building and the land. You're going to get a distribution. You're going to be made whole. It's going to be this other organizations, or the organization that I was looking at getting in, it's going to be their problem. And that convinced her. So that was our story on that.
So we hope these things are of assistance. We went a little bit over our timeline, mea culpa, but we are continuing on these discussions. We hope they have some clarity. We want to thank you very much for your attendance.
No, thank you, Owen, for clearing my head on some of the stuff that we went through.
It's a good time. We enjoy these ourselves. Brings back memories. The structure, we believe, is going to be even more exciting. So some of you, the few and the great, please join us.
Thank you.